Ciao a tutti! If you are a beginner and you've started using your Italian when visiting the country, by the way, bravo for doing that, you probably experienced this situation. You think of what you want to say in English, translate it word by word to Italian, and something sounds off, or Italian people give you a puzzled look. Now, don't worry, this happens to everyone who's learning Italian because translating literally is the easiest way for our brain to go. But in Italian, oftentimes we express the same concept with different words and expressions than in English. So today I'm going to show you 4 super common phrases where this direct translation just doesn't work, and I will teach you what to say instead and especially why we say that differently. If you want to speak Italian with confidence when traveling, then make sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. You will get practical weekly lessons that teach you the real Italian that you need for authentic conversation. And at the end of the video, let me know in the comments which one of these phrases surprised you the most. Ok, iniziamo. Let's begin. Frase numero 1. How would you ask someone, do you speak English? In italiano. Now, most students will reply this. Tu parli inglese? Now, this is not the most common way we ask this question in Italian. Now, it is the literal translation from English. Do you speak English? Tu parli inglese? But I'm going to explain why this is not the way we actually ask this question in Italian. So, reason number 1. When talking to strangers or in formal situations, we don't use tu. Tu is informal. It's supposed to be used with family, friends, and people we are very familiar with, which is usually not the case when you're asking a stranger. So in that context, you need to switch to lei, the formal you in Italian. So let's see how you would phrase that correctly. We will not say tu, but we will use lei. Lei parla inglese? And this is already a better way to ask this question. Lei parla inglese because it uses lei, which is formal you. But then I have another correction to make. When asking questions in Italian, and this applies to any type of question, so keep this in mind, we tend to drop the subject pronoun. So we don't really say lei parla, oppure tu mangi, or per esempio tu vivi. We don't say that. We just say parla, or mangia, or vivi. So remember, when asking questions in Italian, drop that subject pronoun. So that's the last correction we will make to this sentence. Parla inglese? That's the correct way to ask, do you speak English in Italian? Ok, frase numero 2. How would you say, I can speak a little Italian? Now, let's take more space for this. Now, the literal translation to this is, so I can speak a little Italian. Most students translate this literally to posso parlare un piccolo italiano. And also this is a case of where the direct translation doesn't work in Italian. So let's see why. First, posso parlare is something we never say. Now, I know this is going to be something quite surprising for most of you because I know that in textbooks and classes, when you learn potere, which is the verb of posso, they tell you potere means can. So you think if I'm using can in English, I can use potere in Italian. That's not the case. We never say posso parlare. Why? Never, ever. Because potere in Italian doesn't really translate to can in English. It's more similar to may. So we use posso. If we use posso, that means I'm allowed to, or I have permission to, not I am able to. Okay, so remember, potere in Italian is much more similar to may in English rather than can in English. Use potere when you talk about giving permission or asking for permission, not when you want to say that you're able to do something. So forget potere in these instances. So the first thing that we need to do is to remove potere. Don't use that, because if you say posso parlare italiano, then people will be like, of course you can. Certo che puoi parlare italiano. Of course you're allowed to speak Italian. No one is going to stop you from speaking Italian. So remember, posso parlare italiano to an Italian ear will sound like I am allowed or I have permission to speak Italian. It will not sound like I can speak Italian. So what are we going to use for that? We're going to just use parlo. We are way more direct when wanting to explain I can speak. We just say I speak a little bit of Italian. So the first correction that we will make to this sentence is parlo. Parlo. I speak. That's all you need to say. Parlo italiano. I speak Italian. Now, what if you want to add a little bit, a bit of Italian? So I speak a bit of Italian. Using piccolo is not correct, because piccolo in Italian means small rather than a little bit of. Per esempio, if you want to say a small dog, that's un piccolo cane. So if you want to say a little bit of, you need another expression, which is un po' di. Un po' di means a little bit in Italian. You can use that whenever you need it. Un po' di sale, a little bit of salt. Un po' di formaggio, a little bit of cheese. But also un po' di italiano, a little bit of Italian. So the correct way to say, the most natural way of saying I can speak a little Italian in Italian would be parlo un po' di italiano. Parlo un po' di italiano. Va bene? Perfetto. By the way, if you want to remember these phrases, so the correct way of saying, the most natural way of saying these phrases, and the reasons why we say this, because I know I'm sharing quite a few grammar points with this lesson, please remember that you can download the PDF I prepared for you for this lesson, as I always do for my YouTube lessons. The link will be in the description below this video. So use that to easily review this lesson anytime you need to. Ok. Continuiamo, let's continue. Frase numero 3. How would you ask, how do you say X in Italian? Now, many people would translate this literally into come dici, how do you say X, we say X for X, in italiano. Come dici X in italiano? This is almost correct, but not quite. Why? Because if you ask someone come dici, this means how do you personally say this in Italian? Like, Valentina, how do you Valentina, say this? Maybe someone else is going to say that in a different way, but how do you personally say that in Italian? And that's probably not what you want to ask. You want to say, when you're in English, you say, how do you say this in Italian? That means, how is this word translated into Italian? So in general, in the dictionary, not just the specific way of that specific person. So this is the number one reason why this is not correct, because if you ask come dici means how do you personally say that? Plus, this is informal because it's using the tu, come dici, tu dici, and tu dici is informal. So how do we actually ask this in Italian? What's the most natural way of asking how do you say X in Italian? And that is, let me show you this. Come si dice X in italiano? What is that si? Allora, first of all, did you notice that we switched from dici to dice? That's the third person singular that's used for formal you, but also in combination with si dice, that means how does one say X, say this. So come si dice is a phrase that you really want to learn, because that's the natural way to ask in Italian, how do you say something, as in how does one say that? Not you personally, but one. How does the language says that? How does the dictionary says that? What's the normal way, the common way of saying that? How does one say that? Come si dice, per esempio, come si dice house in italiano? Come si dice house in italiano? Si dice casa. That's a common answer. Si dice casa. Va bene? Perfetto. So remember, whenever you want to ask how do you say this in Italian, come si dice whatever in italiano? Perfetto. Frase numero 4. What if you want to say I am from and you want to say where you're from? Now, most students will say sono di. Now, this is not totally wrong in one case, if you couple that with your hometown. So you can definitely say, per esempio, sono di New York. That would be correct. Sono di New York. You can say sono di where I am from only if you couple that with your hometown. But most students use sono di, for example, with their country. So I've heard a lot of sono di America. That's unfortunately not correct because we don't use sono di with countries. We only use sono di with cities, with towns. So sono di America is always wrong, unfortunately, not correct in Italian. People will understand you, but that's not the natural way to say that in Italian. So what should you do instead? The easiest way that I always recommend at the beginning is to use your nationality. So you can say sono, but instead of saying sono di America, you say sono americano. So you use your nationality as an adjective. Sono americano, oppure, or for example for me, sono italiana, and so forth. So that's the easiest thing to do, especially if you're a beginner. Forget about prepositions like sono di or vengo da. Just say I am American, I am English, sono inglese, sono canadese, Canadian, sono cinese, I'm Chinese. Whichever you want, whichever your nationality, use that instead. By the way, I have a dedicated video about how to introduce yourself correctly in Italian, even if you're a beginner, where I talk about these more in depth. So if you want to learn more about this, the link will be in the description as well. And I'm also going to leave the links to some other related videos that have to do with beginner conversation. So if you like this video, you may want to check them out too. And that's it for today. These were very common phrases that show you why learning a language isn't just about translating words. It's about understanding how different languages express the same ideas in their own unique ways. And the more you practice these Italian patterns, the more natural your Italian will sound. If this video helped you understand these differences better, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And this really helps me to keep making these videos. Now, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced any of these translation challenges? And which one of these phrases surprised you the most? Quale frase ti ha sorpreso di più? Leave me a comment below and let me know. Ci vediamo al prossimo video. See you in the next video.